Hey everybody, Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of YFP Planning's fee-only certified financial planners. Before we jump into today's question, I want to give a shout out to YFP Planning's incredible team that makes this segment possible. YFP Planning offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. You can learn more and book a free discovery call by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from the Fritsches in Oregon.
Hi, we're the Fritsches from Troutdale, Oregon, and current YFP clients. Shout out to our YFP financial team, Kelly, Christina, and Sarah, and our YFP tax prep and planning team, Paul and Ariel. We are about 1 to 2 months away from having our student loans completely YFP'd and are deciding on how we can go best forward to help us build wealth and change our family tree. Do we aggressively pay more towards our mortgage and try and have that paid off in 5 years so we can free up that amount of money to invest? And during that time, also just contribute the minimum required amount to get the 401k Roth 401k match, employer match? Or do we aggressively invest now and keep the mortgage payments at a minimum? Or do we do some combination of those? Or are we completely off and need to follow some other plan? We are in our late 30s. Our child's 529 only has a couple $100 in it, and our combined retirement accounts are about $130,000. We currently take home after mortgage about $8,000. We will be after the student loans are paid off. Thanks for everything you do at YFP. We love you guys.
Thank you to the Fritsches for submitting the question we featured on this week's show. Tim Baker, what are your thoughts?
This is a great question, and thanks for submitting that, guys. I love this question because one, I think it's good to kind of stop and recognize the achievement, which is getting the loans retired, and I think that's the first time that we've seen YFP used kind of as a verb there, which I love. I think to me when I look at this situation, Tim, I always like to kind of step back and go back to the balance sheet and the goals. Like, why are we even here to begin with? So, I think the question is, it's kind of like it's kind of binary. It's like, do we go all in on paying the mortgage off in 5 years and do the minimums for the 401k, or do we kind of flip that around? We're all in on the investment and do the minimums on the house, or is there a shade of gray, in between? I think, I would even, open it up further. And when I was looking at this, and when I was looking at the Fritsches, their goals, some of the other things that they had there that would just want to make sure that we're allocating dollars for are things like Disneyland and other travel, plans in the US. They talk about, volunteer. So is this a time where we could potentially, look at scaling back the amount of hours that we're working, so we're spending time with Quinn? One of the other goals out there was like home remodel. And a lot of these, like when we put a timeline on there, in terms of our major purchase review, is 5 years, 5+ years. So to me, do some of these things get to be, do they bump up because we've kind of, accomplished this and we have a little bit more cash flow? I would probably want to ask some clarifying questions around what is the education plan. So is the idea to put, 100% of the dollars aside to be able to, for undergrad? Are we trying, is it a third, and then finally, what does retirement look like? Probably, I think we need to probably do a nest egg calculation and put in, okay, 130,000, look at our current contribution rate. I love the fact that they're aggressively, they're in an aggressive IPS, 100% equity, 0% fixed income, because they're in their 30s. They have decades until, they really need to be accessing these dollars. So I would even make it a little bit more broader than just, is it mortgage or is it 401k? I would also make sure that we're sprinkling some of those things in. There probably is a mathematical, question to this. Like, I'm sure, if we're close to paying off the house in 5 years, the rate that they have is probably pretty great. And we know rates have gone up recently. But that money might be better spent in the market, because you could look at the market right now as being on sale. And we know that over 20, 30 years, it's probably going to outpace what you're typically going to see when you retire a debt that's in its 2, 3, 4%. But the counterpoint to that, Tim, is like, okay, if you pay off the mortgage in 5 years, that's another slug of dollars that you're not putting towards debt. So then what could we do with that? So I just think that, and I don't want to steal Kelly's thunder, or Kelly Christina's thunder, but those would be the questions I would want to go back. It's like, hey, I love the questions that you're asking, but what about all these other things that a wealthy life makes, such as travel, such as volunteerism, such as maybe a home remodel, that maybe we're not thinking in the context of this particular, subset of, what do we do after the loans are there? So, I'm going to go back to my age old, it depends, but I think there's probably, what I would probably do is do a nest egg, and then, make sure that we are on track for the age in which we want to retire. So whether that's 55, 60, 65, and then start to back in from there. I would ask the question, for me, Tim, if you ask me the question, like, how would it feel if your house would be paid off in 5 years? For me, and this is my bias, I'm like, yeah, that would be great, but it's not really that important to me. If they're like, that is the definition of financial freedom because we don't have any loans now, maybe I'm basically pushing that to the top. Mathematically, does that make sense? I don't know. But if you're not paying a mortgage for the last 25 years of your career, if that's like, that's a lot of cash that you can put into the market, then, it's a tough question. But I think these are the conversations that, I think we have to continuously have with clients to make sure that, we're kind of checking the course of the financial plan. So it's not about the plan, it's about planning. And as these things happen, which is a great momentous things, I think, student loans, when they started, were, I don't know, 86,000 is what I'm looking at on the sheet. Like, that's gone. And now we have those dollars to be able to free up to do other things. I think it's just a matter of clicking that in the right place where it makes sense from an emotional perspective, but it makes sense mathematically. So I think we're asking a lot of the right questions. I want to ask a little bit more to see if there are things that we can do more in the near term, because I would argue, like, how long is Quinn going to be there? Like, in terms of part of your family and live, you want to make sure that, you're having those Disneyland trips. And that was really the genesis of, like, when we went out and purchased the RV, which is a money guzzler. But to me, it was more about the family time and making those memories, with a captive son and daughter. So it's a great case study on what to do when some of these milestones hit.
It is, Tim, a great case study. And one of the things that strikes me here is I think it's sometimes these transition points. Here we're talking about the student loans getting paid off. It could be that, somebody fully funds a kid's college account, somebody pays off a mortgage, somebody hits their nest egg goal. But these transition points, I think, are a great opportunity to take a step back. And exactly as you said, where are we trying to go and why are we trying to go there? And really trying to move this from a option A, option B, to multiple options and what else is in the mix, so that we can evaluate the financial plan. And as you always say, and our planning team does such a great job, making sure we're taking care of our future self, but also living a rich life along the way. And just a shout out to the Fritsches. I think that big accomplishments here, right? Obviously, we're getting the student loans paid off. We're aggressively paying off the mortgage. We're funding the 529. We're talking about retirement plan. We're playing offense.
Yeah.
We're playing offense. And, whatever is the technical outcome that I know Kelly and Christina are going to do an awesome job helping working them through, like, we're playing offense, we're growing the financial plan, and now we're trying to really talk about how can we optimize this, and how can we make sure we not only optimize it but also do it in a way that we're intentionally living life along the way. So I love the questions and the thought behind this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to highlight here is, like, when you talk about playing offense, is I think so many clients, and it could be at any stage of life, but typically if there are student loans involved, there's like this feeling of like scarcity, that you're being suffocated, and that like your options are so limited. I think we've talked about that even from a career perspective, that some people just feel stuck. But I think this transformation happens, and I think a lot of it comes with the plan, with planning, that as you are intentionally engaged with your plan over multiple years, that feeling of scarcity, I think, gives way to options and more of a feeling of abundance. And I think it typically happens more. It happens over time, but I think it happens, more aggressively. I think if you are, engaged and working with someone, and you start, I had a client that said, like, "Hey, I didn't believe you when, you were talking about, like, oh, you have to have, like, a nest egg of X, Y, and Z." But then after a couple of years, they've seen how their investments have grown, just, contributing, the amount, and, being aggressive, and making sure we're taking intelligent risk. So these things compound. And I think it that feeling of scarcity gives way to more of a feeling of abundance and options. And that's the best thing that I think a plan can get you, is optionality.
Great stuff, Tim. And again, thanks to the Fritsches for taking time to submit the question, and for the support of the team at YFP Planning. We really appreciate it. It's a small thank you. We're going to be sending them a super comfy YFP t-shirt, or t-shirts plural. And for folks that would like to have their question answered on a future episode, you can do that two ways. You can shoot us an email, info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com, or you can record your question by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask-YFP. As we wrap up today's episode, an important reminder that the content in this episode is provided for informational and educational purposes only, is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. For more information on this, you can visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your week.